Speaker's Corner tonight. Chunmo Sung is going to teach us a little bit about Korea. He titled his talk Korea for Dummies.
Yeah.
And he had it in 45 minutes, so you're going to get the Reader's Digest version. Chunmo is a newly retired IT fellow. He moved roughly from Atlanta. Let me say, he started in Korea, then moved to Atlanta, up to New York.
New York City, yeah.
Yep, and then
Denver,
to Denver.
yeah.
And when his company invited him to move to California, he declined and joined us. So I'm going just to turn this right over to him and let him teach you everything you wanted to know in 45 minutes about Korea.
Okay, yeah, thank you, kid. Hey, thanks for coming to this talk. So how many people knew that we are visiting Korea next month?
Me.
Okay, how many people didn't know we are visiting Korea next month? Okay, I'm glad you came because you are at the right place, right? So before we start, here's a little story about me. So, whenever you meet someone new, they usually ask you where you're from, right? So, so I met this new person first time, and he asked me whether I'm from China. Like a China, like a Trump. So I said no, and then this guy then asked me, "Oh, then are you from Japan?" And I said no again. And now this guy has a kind of a confused look on his face. So maybe Philippines? So by this time, so now I didn't want to embarrass this guy, right? So I told him, I'm from Korea. Oh, Korea, of course Korea. The south or north. So by this time I kind of ran out of my patience, right? So, and I'm like, you're so dumb. Like, you will never meet anybody from North Korea unless you are physically in North Korea, right? So that there is the title for this talk, the history of Korea for Dummies. So yeah. So how many people have been to Korea? Wow. Okay. So yeah, a lot of people. So when you hear Korea, what are the things that come to your mind?
Kimchi.
Kimchi, okay.
Mash.
Samsung. Mitsubishi? No,
Okay.
Mitsubishi is not a Korean company. Hyundai, yes. What is that? Electronics, okay. K-pop, maybe. Korean movies. Squid Game, right? Soap operas, yes. Soju, right?
Gangnam.
Yes. I'm sorry, what is that? Gangnam Style. Yeah. That's a song, several years ago. Okay, so. Yeah. Well, no, I'm not going to dance. But so you can kind of see that Korea is quite distinct from China or Japan, right? Very unique culture, unique, language, unique, food, right? Somebody mentioned kimchi, right? So we are very distinct, right? So where is Korea, by the way? Do you know? So the Americans are not known for the geographical skill, right? So next test is. So by the way, Kit mentioned that I'm going to teach about Korea. That's wrong, and I am actually going to ask you the questions, right? So I'm not teaching anything for this class or the talk. So where is Korea in the map? So you have to guide me to, kind of point to Korea, right? So we are here, right? Somewhere here in Alaska. So most of us came from here, and then we crossed the Atlantic, and some people came from England, UK, Europe, and then I have to find my mouse. Okay, so we cross here, all the way, keep going to east, right? And then we're here, right? The Korea. Yes, that's correct. So if we kind of zoom on this, right? Let's go to the next slide. If my mouse works here, oops. Very difficult. Okay, so you can see in Korea, right? So around Korea, there are 4 major global powers, right? China, Russia, Japan, United States, way in the Pacific, right? So that kind of shows the Korean history. Korean people are kind of impacted by these powers, right? So throughout the history, so Korea is a relatively smaller, country, right? And so you can see that we are impacted by these, global powers. So my joke in the beginning kind of covers about 80% of what I like to talk about today, right? So all these global powers, and then South and North Korea. So where did the Koreans come from?
That's a trick question.
No. So didn't Koreans just pop up in Korea? They came from somewhere, right? So we believe, nobody knows for sure, right? But around 2000 BC, right? Somewhere in the northeast China, Manchuria, Siberia, Mongolia, right? Around that area, the people moved down to Korean Peninsula, right? And then established a first known kingdom in Korean Peninsula, right? And then some people traveled further to south, crossed the Sea of Japan, and moved to Japan, right? So a lot of Japanese has a Korean ancestry, right? So this is going to haunt us later in the history. So I think that's what so nobody knows it exactly, but this is kind of what we think happened in human migration. All right. So next question is, what were the skills the Asian Koreans are known for? It's not a trick question. Okay, so if we look at some of the Asian artifacts, we see this. So the Koreans are riding horses and then shooting arrows, right? So these are hunters, hunting animals. So we were pretty good at riding horse and shooting arrows, right? So that DNA, the skills are still in our DNA. So that's why we are sweeping all the gold medals in the archery at the Olympics. So there's 5 gold medals in archery. All of them went to Korea. Oh, thank you. So that's that's the Korean people. So next question is then where did the name Korea come from? So we don't call ourselves Koreans, right? That's an English name. 대한민국 is a Korean word. 대한민국 or 한국. So Han is our name for race, Han. Guk is country. So Hanguk, but nobody in Korea speaks English, right? So we don't call ourselves Korean. Korea is an English name. So where this name come from? Anybody knows? New York City? Oh, no. Okay, so who is this guy? He's not a Korean, by the way.
It's like Chinese.
That's Confucius.
No, Confucius? No.
Genghis Khan?
Yes, Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan, right? Depends on how you pronounce it. So we'll just call him Genghis Khan, right? So it's around 13th century, right? This is a Mongol empire, right? Starting from Korea all the way to Eastern Europe, right? So Mongols create the largest contiguous empire in human history, right? So around this time, right? So there was a lot of trade war going on between East and West, right? So this is the time when Marco Polo traveled from Venice to China, right? Around 1275. So when he arrived in China, he found all the things that the West didn't have, like a paper currency, coal, porcelain, and gunpowder, things like that. And some people also think that Marco Polo learned how to make pasta from China, but later, so there is a debate whether that's true or not. So some people say no, that's not true. Pasta existed before Marco Polo, so I don't know which one to believe, right? So there was a lot of trade was going on, and between East and West around this time, along the Silk Road, right? That's how the Marco Polo traveled to China. So at that time, the name of the kingdom in Korea was Goryeo, right? So Goryeo, the name of the Korean kingdom, that name became Korea by the merchants, the Arabs and Persian merchants that were traveling between Middle East and China for trading. Right? So they called the country here Korea. Right? So that's how our name Korea came from. All right. So if you look at this map here, so the Mongols conquered Korea, right? But here is a Japan here. It's not in red. So what happened to Japan? So Mongols didn't try to conquer Japan? Yes, they did. They tried. So what happened was, so when the Mongols, with the Koreans also, were crossing the Sea of Japan to invade Japan, they ran into a severe typhoon. So here in America we call it hurricane. In Britain it's a hurricane, and in Asia it's a typhoon, right? So they ran into a severe typhoon, and most of the ships just sank, right? So the invasion failed. So there's a name for Japanese name for this wind. They call it divine wind in Japan. So this word.
Kamikaze.
Kamikaze, yes. The kamikaze, and this word shows up again later in history. Okay, so that's where our Korea name came from. It's a 13th century. Okay, so next question is, why didn't China conquer Korea? Right, so briefly Mongols conquered Korea, right? But they never completely ruled Korea, right? So Mongols conquered huge territory, but eventually they retreated from most of their conquered territories, right? And then they just ruled China by establishing Yuan dynasty, right? So pretty much the China just left the Korean alone as a kind of vassal state or the independent state. That depends on how you characterize it, right? So why didn't China conquer Korea? I'm sorry?
Divine wind.
Divine wind? No. There wasn't a divine wind. Well, so so the problem was, if you look at Korea, it's a very mountainous country. So a lot of mountains, especially in the north, very high mountains. So it's very difficult to fight, right? And so they tried a couple times and they realized it's not easy to fight in Korea, right? So and then also Koreans kind of figured out how to coexist with China, right? So they pay tribute to China as a big brother, and they just remain as a small brother, right? So unlike Europe, in Europe, these countries are fighting each other about the same size and same population. England, France, Germany, Italy. Whereas in East Asia, we have a big China, and then just a little countries, right? And but we kind of maintain that kind of status quo. The big brother and small brother, and then we just pay tribute to China, right? So that kind of status quo continued until this time. What happened? What is this?
Industrial revolution.
Right. So now, previously, probably China was the superpower, right? I get a lot of new stuff that the West didn't have. But in the late 17th century and early 18th century, right? The industrial revolution in Europe, so now Europe's are producing a lot of new technologies and new stuff that we didn't have before, right? So so the next question is, so we're kind of fast forwarding to 19th century, right? How did Korea react to the West in 1800? Right? So now it's Europeans, Westerners are showing up on the shore of the Korean peninsula, right? So we are seeing these strange-looking people with lots of body hair, right? And the hair colors are yellow, brown, red, that we never seen before, right? So did Koreans welcome the Westerners by feeding them with kimchi and bulgogi?
Probably not.
Probably not. Yes, probably not. So the first arrival of those Westerners were Christian missionaries, right? So what happened to those missionaries? So we executed them, right? So
Good job.
not a good job. Not a good job. So the missionaries who survived this persecution, did a lot of good things in Korea, right? So they built hospitals, they built schools and churches, and also I myself went to a Jesuit college, so a lot of good things they did. But the Koreans, because they are afraid of the foreigners and their technology, they just closed the door to the West, right? They completely closed down the country, and then just killed all the missionaries. So if you go to Korea next year in Seoul, you'll see a shrine in Seoul that memorizes the martyrs in Korea. And ironically, now 1 out of 3 Koreans are Christians. So yeah, so it's that's an interesting fact. So we closed the door to the West in 1800, right? But what about Japan, right? Unlike Korea, Japan just opened the door, right, to the West. So Japan went through this what they call Meiji Restoration. So Meiji Restoration means so they are restoring the power of emperor, right? Because before this Meiji Restoration, Japan was ruled by samurais, right? Warlords, samurais, just controlling each regions, right? So it was a decentralized. But with the Meiji Restoration in 18th century, they kind of restored the power of emperor, the centralized power, and then they rapidly accepted the Western technologies and Western civilization, right? So Japan. So the next question is then how long did Japan annex Korea?
I didn't know they did.
You didn't even know that Japan annexed Korea. So it's so
70 years.
yeah, or around 35 or 40 years, right? So Japan, as they become more industrialized, they become powerful, right? And then they become more militarized, right? So they were fighting with China and Russia, and they won both, right? So now it's very easy to just take over Korea, right? Korea was very weak country, just close to the outside world. So it was easy to just take and annex them to Japan, right? So that happens in 1910, and then that lasted until the end of Second World War, 1945. So the question, so next question, so we went to Honolulu, right? Everybody went to Honolulu, and they went to the Pearl Harbor Museum, right? So next couple, with the unknown reason, was that we don't know why, right? Japan decided to attack the United States, even though they knew they cannot win the war against the United States, right? So they attacked Pearl Harbor, and then they so until they surrendered in 1945. And then who is this person here? MacArthur. Right? So he doesn't know yet, but he played a very important role in 5 years. So just going back to the Japanese rule in Korea. So Japan ruled Korea with a very heavy hand, right? So there was a lot of atrocities committed by Japanese in Korea and also in China, right? And that their claim about Korea is pretty much the same as what Russia is claiming about Ukraine, right? So basically, the Korea doesn't exist. Korean people doesn't exist. Korean language don't exist, right? So my parents went through this Japanese rule. So when they went to school, they have to learn Japanese. So teachers are Japanese, right? And they have to speak Japanese. And also they had to adopt the Japanese name, right? So they were trying to just erase the Korea. And their excuse was, we are the same people. Japanese and Koreans, we saw that in the previous slide. Many people, actually, many Japanese, they migrated from Korea, right? So their excuse is, we are same people. So Japanese, Korean. So so they tried to erase Korea, but fortunately they lost the war, right? And then we got our freedom back in 1945, right? So the next question is, then how did the Korean peninsula get divided after World War II? We know what happened to Germany, right? Germany got divided by East and West, but Japan didn't get divided, and instead of we got divided. So why that happened?
Because of the Chinese Communist Revolution.
Chinese communists, not directly. Yeah, but you made a good point, but I will explain that later. So the simplest answer that I can give you is because Japan didn't want to happen, and then also United States and its allies didn't want to happen. So we think that the World War II in the Pacific ended when United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where we're going to visit soon, right? But I think that the more important factor was the Soviets declared war against Japan in October, around October 9th, right? So Soviets didn't fight in the Pacific until the last minute, right? So Soviets declared the war, and then after a couple of days later, Japan just surrendered because they didn't want the Russians come to Japan, right? So before they land, the Russians land in Japan. Japan just surrendered to the Allies, right? United States and China and then Britain. So and then also the United States didn't want to divide Japan, right? So United States and Russia decided to use the 38th parallel in Korean Peninsula, right? So north of that parallel, the Soviet troops will come to disarm Japanese troops there. And then the United States and the Allies came to the south of the 38th parallel and then to come in to disarm the Japanese, right? So there was a temporary measure, but how the communist works, right? So they were supposed to leave, soon, but they didn't do that, and then they established a communist regime in North Korea, and they didn't participate the free election in the whole Korean Peninsula, right? So only the election happened in the south, and North Korea is now under the Communist Party rule, right? So we know what happened in 1950, right? So the communist regime was established in the north, and then so now it's in the south. It's the capital. The free government, I should say. The free government was established in the south. So next question is, what made North Korea to invade South Korea in June 1950? Anybody? I'm sorry? They thought they could win. Okay, that's yeah. I'm sure they did. But somebody over there mentioned something about China, I think. Yes. So I think that the three things happened right before the North Korea, the great leader North Korea, North Korea decided to invade South Korea, right? So in 1949, the Soviets tested the first atomic bombs, right? They tested it successfully. So now the Soviets is a nuclear power, right? So that's kind of played an important role in Korean War, right? And then the second was, as somebody over there mentioned, China, right? So China was going through the civil war between communists and the nationalists, right? And then in 1949, you know, the nationalists lost, and then they fled to Taiwan, right? So the Communist Party, you know, united the whole China except Taiwan, and China is about to invade Taiwan in 1950, right? It's kind of similar situation that we have currently, right? So, and then the third reason was in 1950, the U.S. Announced their defense perimeter in the Pacific. So if you look at the map here and the line here, where is Korea? Yeah, outside of the U.S. Defense perimeter in the Pacific, right? So the Korea is not in the U.S. defense perimeter. So that's what made the Korean dear leader, the great leader, to think that he can win the war, right? So they did a surprise attack, I guess, in 1950 June. I will explain this picture later. So, but anyway, so it works in this. Okay, so let's go through here to kind of give you an idea how the war progressed. So in June, the North Korea attacked the South Korea, right? And right away, Seoul is near the DMZ, the 38th parallel at that time, fell right away. And so we are all the way down to, we're down here. So this is Busan, right? The second largest city, port in Korea. So only, so the communists, occupied most of now the South Korea, except this, small area here at the end of the Korean Peninsula, right? Within 3 months, right? The war started in June, and in August, we are already down here, right? So when the war broke out in Korea, what did the United States do first? Yes, there was a UN Security Council meeting, and then they decided to send troops to Korea, right? And someone in this on this ship remind me that the Turkey also sent troops to Korea, and his father fought in Korean War. So not only the United States, but there's several other countries who send the troops to Korea, right? And then the second thing that they did was they sent the 7th Fleet, not to Korea, but to Taiwan, right? In order to protect Taiwan from the Chinese invasion, right? Because I explained to you that in 1950, China is about to invade Taiwan, right? So now the UN troops, right? So the General MacArthur was the head of this the UN Allied Command, right? So at this time, what MacArthur decided was he's going to land in the heart of the enemy territory, right? That's Incheon. It's around near Seoul, near 38th parallel. But the problem with the Incheon is the tidal range is very large. So the high tide and low tide, that difference is about, like they say, it's about 30 feet, right? So the North Koreans didn't think that UN troops will land in Incheon, so they were not defending that area. So area is here, right, around here, and then they're mainly focused on the here in the south, Busan. So they were expecting logically, the UN troops will try to land in Busan, right, crossing the Sea of Japan, right. So the MacArthur, decided to land in Incheon. Yeah, so you can see the UN troops landed in Incheon. So now, so enemy supply got cut, and then so now we're pushing back the communists in the both sides, right, and pushing back to north, right. So we took Seoul, and then we are pushing all the way back to the North Korea and China border in Yalu River, right? Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What are the numbers that are changing there? 553, 800?
Casualties.
This is a casualty here, and these numbers are I think these are troop numbers. Yeah. So we are pushing. So MacArthur's army, the UN troops are pushing all the way to Yalu River, so that is North Korea and South Korea border. And then what happened? Right. So China entered the war. Yes. So they were sending 100,000 armies to Korean War, right? So what happened, right? So now it's it's November. It's around November, and so when it got cold around December, we are losing the war, right? Because not only the Chinese entered the war, but also it's very cold, and then the UN troops, they're not used to that kind of a cold, right? So they are getting frost bites. The weapons are frozen. So now the Chinese and the North Koreans are pushing toward south, right? So we lost the Seoul again. Seoul fell to the communist north again, second time, right? So the picture that I showed you here is when the Koreans are evacuating. So you can see that the bridge was destroyed. So probably the Allies just destroyed the bridge when they were evacuating, right? So the civilians are just crossing this frozen Han River. So this is Han River in Seoul, right? The river they're crossing the Seoul. So these civilians are just to crossing this frozen river to heading to south. And then the one of the tragedy in Korean War was that the civilians killed each other, right? So so when the communists took over Seoul, they killed all the anti-communists, right? And it doesn't really matter whether you're anti-communist. If your neighbor says you're the anti-communist, then you are executed, right? And then vice versa. When we took the Seoul again, we a lot of civilians executed communists, right? So there was a lot of civilian casualties, right? And the war ended basically the war. So we were going back and forth, right? And then this war continued for 3 more years, and then they decided not to fight anymore, right? So signed the truce ceasefire. So the Korean War ended in 1953, but we are technically at war because we never signed the peace treaty. So after the war, you know what happened in South Korea, right? And South Korea developed to a modern country, and North Korea is still remaining the very close country, right? So since we're running out of time, I might end it here. So I will continue, right? So one other thing that I wanted to mention was, so we are going back and forth in the Korean War, right? And then when we're retreating, right? What did MacArthur wanted to do when we were retreating? Right. So MacArthur wanted to bomb China, right? But then the problem was the Truman knew that now Soviet has a nuclear weapon, right? And so the American people don't want to start a third World War, right? So Truman just fired MacArthur for insubordination, right? And then the Korean War continued 2 more years, and then we signed a truce. So the Korean War stopped, right? But in a way, the war is still going on indirectly, right? So South Korea was the only nation that sent troops to Vietnam in the 70s, right? Other than United States. And North Korea is sending troops to Russia directly now to fight against Ukraine. And then South Korea sending weapons to Ukraine indirectly through U.S. and Poland and other NATO allies, right? So this war is continuing, right? People ask me whether 2 countries will reunite anytime soon, and so my answer is not anytime soon. And the greatest impediment to unification is, in my opinion, is China, right? So for China, the North Korea is their security buffer, right? If North Korea falls, they will have the South Korea and the United States at their door, right? So someone mentioned that between the distance from Beijing to Taipei is 1,000 miles. The distance between Beijing and Pyongyang, which is the capital of North Korea, is half of that, 500 miles, right? So North Korea is more important to China than Taiwan, in terms of their security. Taiwan doesn't threaten China, right? But if North Korea falls, it's a China is in a security threat, right? So as long as they can prop up the North Korean regime, right? I don't think there will be a reunification soon. And also we mentioned about Taiwan. Before the Korean War, China was about to attack Taiwan, right? And someone that the history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? So whatever happens in Taiwan, some people expect that there will be a conflict in next 2 or 3 years. It may not be a military conflict, but maybe some kind of a naval blockage or something, right? That's very possible. And that will definitely affect the Korean Peninsula too, right? So, so when I think about the future of Korea, I wish I could say, the Koreans, South Korean, North Koreans, and hold hands and sing Kumbaya in the near future, but that's unlikely scenario. Yes, a nuclear bomb. Yes. Right. Okay. So any questions before we finish?
Got 10 minutes for Q&A.
Yeah.
Every male in South Korea has to do military service,
Right.
So you did your service when you were there, right?
I didn't do the full service, but I had did a shorter service.
You did a service.
Yes. Yeah. So that's for 2 years. Yeah.
In preparation of the war coming back.
Right. Every man, not woman, but has to do the military service. Yeah.
Fred has a question.
Yes, Fred.
Who is your guess to replace Kim Jong-il? Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-un. So I think Kim Jong-un has a daughter. I don't think he has a son. And so daughter is about 10, 12 years old, right? And then I think he's grooming her as the next leader. Yes. Another question? Yes.
Did at the end of World War II, did the Russians actually come into North Korea
Yes.
to replace the Japanese?
Correct.
They were physically there.
Yes.
And then when they left,
Yeah, so in the 1948, 49, both the Soviets and the U.S. troops left from Korean Peninsula.
so was there any, did the Russians have a debate about this? Like, why didn't they stay? Did they expect the Chinese would do their job?
They put a puppet government there, right? Russians.
Okay.
So the communist government, right? So it's a very kind of their, kind of puppet government. That's similar to what they did in Eastern Europe, in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking
Yes.
of Poland and Czechoslovakia, do you think there's going to be a coup at some point, where North Korea?
In North Korea, no. It's a very kind of police state, right? So everybody has to be very careful about what they say, what they do, right?
East Germany was like that. All
Yeah.
the states were like that.
Yes.
Do you
Yeah.
think as technology improves and as people get more information as to what's going on around the world,
No, there's because they cannot access internet. There's no internet in North Korea, right? Hey, yes, Holly.
So when they divided,
Yes.
arbitrarily divided,
Yes.
before that it was one country, and maybe your relatives
Right.
And then what happened?
So they got separated. Yeah. So, millions of people came down to South during the Korean War. So because they knew that, communist regime there is a very oppressive, right? So a lot of North Koreans, they moved down to the South, and then when the ceasefire happened, we cannot go. We cannot travel to each other, right? So yeah, so the families got separated. So we don't know what happened to them. Occasionally there is some kind of show, I guess, kind of propaganda. So they had this event to kind of bring the people from the families in the north with the south, so they meet once a while. But I don't know whether that's really helpful. That's just a propaganda, right? Because so many years has passed, right? So even if your family, once you got separated, you don't have a really kind of close relationship with them anymore. Any questions? Yes.
I read in the British press that Kim Jong-il had never tried golf, and when he tried golf, he got several holes in one straight away.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is very good at golf.
Right.
It would be brilliant to solve all the problems if they just had a game of golf.
Yeah.
It's the way forward.
Yeah, I mean their style, the North Korean styles are kind of similar to Trump's style, right? Very bombastic and very extreme. Yeah, but I mean, so you can say a lot about North Korea. Yeah, they are crazy, they are brainwashed. But what I see is like I'm kind of looking at Korea in 18th, 19th century, right? So they are kind of frightened by outside world, right? So they just close down the country. But one thing you have to admire them is they try to be self-sufficient, right? Even though they are poor, right? They are trying to be self-sufficient, and so they're trying to be independent, right? So, but yeah, they are somewhat crazy, I guess. Any questions? Yes.
What's the situation for young Korean girls when the Chinese implemented their one-child policy? They were killing a lot of their girl babies, and now they have a dearth of young women that can give birth. And so, my understanding is that they're stealing or encouraging somehow young women to go from Korea to China. So, what's the actual situation?
I don't know about that, but you know that in South Korea the birth rate is going down, right? So so I know some people are actually escaping from North Korea, so they're going to China, and then go to South Korea. So North Koreans are actually. Some North Koreans are escaping from North Korea and then come to South Korea. I don't know about, and then also there is so the northern part of Korea, North Korea, and then is actually was so a lot of Koreans actually living around China and North Korea border. So they are Koreans, right? But they live in China, and these people also come to South Korea. But I don't know about many Chinese girls are moving to Korea. I don't know about that. Yes.
The birth rate issue. I read something the other day that Korea's birth rate is so low that in 2 generations you could go from about 70 million down to about 10 million in population. How does that, I mean, maybe that seems extreme, but that's what it said current trends would take you to. How does that compare with the birth rate and the population in North Korea? And currently, which has the biggest population?
South Korea has about 50 million, 50, and then North Korea has about 20 million, 20. So South Korea's population is about the same as Spain, and then the GDP, right, is about the same too. So South Korea and Spain has about the same economic power. So we are around number 12 and 13 in terms of GDP ranking. The North Korea, I don't know their birth rate, but I'm kind of guessing it's more than the South Korea, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
South
So-
Korea is about the lowest. In the world.
Right. So I think the government is trying to address that. So because the rate is going down, the reason is the economic reason, right? It's very difficult to buy house and raise children. So the government is trying to support the children. So if you have more than one or two children, they government support them financially. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
This has been fascinating. And I think